Let's get started. Go ahead and welcome y'all here to the first roundtable discussion of this conference. My name's R.L. Frazier. I'm county agent with the LSU Ag Center. I serve East Carroll, Madison parishes. For those of y'all that may or may not know, I started the Arkansas line and come down about 100 miles. I cover the upper third of the Mississippi Delta on the Louisiana side. Also on this panel, I have Mr. Noble Guedon. He is the local precision ag specialist and supervisor for our local John Deere dealer with Guedon Equipment Company. And Noble, if you need to clarify some of my introduction, you can help. But he's also a producer and a industry rep. And then I have Mr. Dennis Burns, my cohort, with the LSU Ag Center. He picks up where I leave off at Madison and goes down to the south end of Catahoula Parish, which carries us between he and I. We cover the entire Delta in Louisiana. Dennis and I both work with Precision Ag, GIS agents for the whole state of Louisiana. So to kind of get us kicked off here today, y'all want to say anything else about yourself before we get started? I didn't come in here prepared to tell y'all how to seed or how to use variable rate. We want to learn from one another, the whole program. We're here to try to answer any questions you may have, but we want you to interact with us. Tell us what you're doing or what you may want to try to get out of this, and maybe there's somebody here that can help you other than us. So with that, Kelly, would you kind of start it off, introduce who you are, where you at, what you do, and we'll just kind of go around the room and tell everybody?
I'm Kelly Shutt and with Shutt Seed Service in Louisiana, and we serve Concordia, Catahoula, and Tensall, and we've got another store further south down in Hamburg, Louisiana, and serve Boyles and St. Landry and Rapides and that part of the state. And I'm just glad to be here and interested in variable rate seeding and technology and the latest advancements, and appreciate you all putting this on.
Okay.
Marshall Warwick. I am a grower in Tensall Parish. We grow corn, cotton, and soybeans. We do some precision ag stuff, so I'm looking to see what some pros and cons are that y'all found and see.
Good.
I'm Dustin Whitmore. I run the hamburger store. I work with Kelly Shutt. He's my boss, and I run the hamburger store down there in Boyle Parish, and happy to be here.
Not much I can say. I'm Justin, I'm his twin brother, but I work for Kelly right there at the Berry location.
All right, sir.
I'm Joe Jenkins, and from Tennessee, maybe in the wrong area.
No, sir.
Yeah. But anyway, just interested in variable rate seeding.
All right, sir. Yes, sir.
Cecil, introduce yourself.
Oh, Cecil, come in.
Put you on the spot, Cecil.
Doing that?
Introduce yourself.
Cecil Parker, I'm a crop consultant in Northeast Louisiana.
I'm Tyler Hydrick. I'm a crop consultant in Northeast Arkansas.
Okay.
Jonathan Hall, I'm a field research lead with Indigo Ag from the Mid-South.
I'm Kyle Wilson, I'm a research agronomist with Indigo Ag.
Okay.
Savannah Cox, Greenway Ag, I'm an ag technology specialist there, and over the operations where our technology team.
Okay.
David Mosley, soybean specialist in Louisiana.
Just came on last week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ashley Peters, consultant, Northeast Louisiana.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mark.
Mike Smith, I'm a consultant, work in Tennessee Valley, Alabama.
Okay.
I'm Neil Isbell from North Alabama, producer.
Okay. Okay. I already kind of kick it off. How many of you either work with farmers that are doing variable seeding rate or interested in it, or have done some? Yes, sir. Kind of tell us what you're doing.
Well, I mean, the first year we did it, I've only got one grower that does it. We do it on all of his corn and all of his cotton. But the first year I wrote it, and the second year we've got a software writing it. I say writing, we're picking the seeding rates, but the software does all the legwork for us. And, you know, it's doing like 100 zones per field, so you're getting, you know, real specific, and it's based off NDVI and all this stuff that, you know, we don't really know whether it's adding value or not, but most of our stuff now is going through that, and I just want to hear everybody else's perspective on, you know, if they're seeing an advantage to it. I think the biggest advantage that we're seeing is it's saving us seed costs. You know, I think we're.
No, well, you got, last year, you and I talked about, and you did a little bit with some zones, but you didn't have 100 zones. How many did you have?
Probably four.
Four
Three or
zones?
four.
Yeah, I mean, the year that I rode them, we had at most 5.
Yeah.
But now with the software, it lets us break it down to 100 zones based off peak biomass with the NDVI imagery, and it accounts for yield and all that stuff. And you can tell it what years of NDVI imagery you want it to use. So, you know, if I'm growing cotton, I can go to the years that field was in cotton, and I can pick our peak biomass years for cotton, or peak biomass maps for cotton, based on that satellite imagery. And that's the way we're doing it right now. And it seems to be working all right. It's saving us money in the seed costs. And the program is actually free from Echelon, or Echelon is free through our nutrient store that they buy from. So, yeah, it's pretty
Rick, my first concern would be, you talk about 100 zones. What size field are we talking about? 100-acre field, or are we talking?
Any size. It can be a 7-acre field. It'll put as many zones as it can fit with that planter being able to go across it.
Right.
So that planter is constantly swapping.
I think it sounds like when we were doing that NDVI with fertilizer, what we got into where it was changing so fast. It never really,
We found that
it was changing, it couldn't keep up with how fast it was needing to change the electronic, the onboard computer would, but the valve wouldn't move fast enough. That would be my concern with it.
We've had to do some really expensive, you know, checking our seed and spacing and all that kind of stuff, just to see if, you know, what does our look ahead need to be on the tractor.
Right.
To say, you know, hey, this is coming, I need to go ahead and start making my swap. And usually it swaps over in, I mean, a matter of, I mean, it's quick.
Yeah.
So I'm not overly concerned about having that many zones. I mean, it's still processing even as it's going through the field. When it's in the same population, it's still telling itself, hey, I'm at this spot, I need to be at this population. And it's doing that the whole way. So I don't think it's that much different to tell it swap.
Are they using is he using an electric drive planter? How's he controlling that many sections inside, or how many zones inside that field? Is he using a row by row with electric drive planter?
Yeah, I mean, this is the max emerge, high speed.
Is exact merge?
Yeah, you're driving 12 miles an hour across that field, and that thing.
That's what we've run into, is when you have that many zones, can you actually apply the product on that many zones? And it's good that he's using electric drive.
And we're getting a scorecard back from Echelon that says, you know, it's a regression curve, and it shows, you know, based on your score from 0 to 1,000, how well they think that planting prescription matched your yield map and all this stuff. So we're getting more fields closer to 1,000 than we had 3 years ago. So
it's always been the standard, you don't want a zone smaller than a quarter of an acre. That's always been the rule of thumb since we've been doing it, since we started in 2004, long time. And it's always just been the standard. If you divide up the field into zones, normally if you want like a prescription, you do 3 to 5 zones, and you don't want any particular zone or spot in the field smaller than a quarter of an acre.
yeah.
And if you're doing 100, we've done some stuff with Mississippi State years ago with what the statistician, can't remember his name, but anyway, and he did a lot of that, and it really got confusing, but equipment's gotten better than that. And easier. And Noble does, he works for Goldman's with their stuff, and you can talk about the planters and how well they change, how fast can they change.
Well, that was the first question I was going to ask you is what kind of technology was he using? Was it electric drive? And that's what we're running into is for, 10 years ago, you may have section control with one section on either side, so you're planting with 2 sections. So that was the amount of management zone variability you could have. But now with with the electric drive planters or even the exact apply nozzles where you're having nozzle by nozzle section control, no matter what color you have, it's allowing you to have more zones and more management zones out there. So the equipment is caught up with it now.
Yeah.
You know, that is an awful lot of managing from a consultant perspective. So that'd be a lot of zones to check out in the field.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
We do the variable rate seeding, but we do it a little different. Not quite as technical, I guess you could say, but we look at zones, and the zones are all based on fertility, what the fertility in that zone is, and the soil type of that zone. And then we make a determination of how many seeds we want, and we usually run from 28 to 36, but value-wise to the farmer, we're probably looking in that 32 to 34, 33, somewhere in that range is the most economical range that we find. Based on across the board there.
RL, Mr. Duckworth,
Yes.
tell them about the center pivot.
Okay. Several years ago, well, last year, excuse me, we had our first Precision Ag Conference in Louisiana. We had a panel there of producers from north, central, and southern Louisiana on it. And had a guy from North Louisiana on. They had started with Precision Ag variable seeding rate 10, 12 years ago. First ones I ever knew of that done it. And he said they went very simple the first year. He said it was, you look at it over the years of yield maps, outside that pivot, cut less than inside the pivot. He said, so it was a no-brainer for them. The first year, they went out there and I don't know, he cut his seeding rate a third or something, I forgot the numbers. But he just lowered his seeding rate outside the pivot. And he saved enough the first year with their variable seeding rate to pay for all the additions to the planters. And made a little money off of just that part. And has been with it for years. And where I come up with the term the cons, that's one thing a lot of folks have always, when I've approached them about variable seeding rate or anything, variable fertilizer or anything, well, I don't want to risk that one good year by cutting back. And he said that year, or a couple of years into it, where they cut the seeding rate back, where for years they had planted it uniform across the field, and they variable rated fertilizer and everything. He said outside the pivot in a good year, then cut equal to under the pivot, when they were irrigating it. The field leveled itself out in a good year. It didn't have the yield drag. But by reducing his seeding rate, then they had that dry year. He reduced it down to where it was a break-even point, not a losing proposition, because he reduced everything in it. So I reckon if I had to make a suggestion, your program sounds really great for somebody that's kind of got their feet wet. A new person look at more like what this gentleman was talking about, kind of push those high yielding areas and take away from the lower yielding areas a little bit, or reduce your input cost and get it back to a break-even point. That's kind of what Dennis and I started with years ago. I reckon we've done like everybody else, Dennis. In the beginning, we told them Precision Ag was going to make you money. We found that to be a lie.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, not make you money, excuse me. Save you money. Save you money. That was the big topic. Save you money. We found that out to be a lie. Because we were doing some work with some variable rate nitrogen on cotton. And we actually increased their nitrogen rate about a third.
Mm-hmm. The total on the whole field.
Compared to the rest of the field where we were at. And that, by increasing his cost of nitrogen on that plot, we more than increased the yield. I forgot the numbers, it's been too long ago, to offset the fertilizer cost plus making money. So we didn't save him money, but we made him money. So we changed our statement from precision ag will save money to it'll make you money, but you gotta work at it. And you gotta find those niches as to where can I tweak and where can I not. But try to get everything back to a break-even point. And the cons, like I said, that was the one that kept coming up was 1 in 5 years, I'm gonna have a really good year and I've hurt myself. No, you've got enough there that you're gonna bring yourself back to a break-even point. Anybody else got any bad experiences they would like to share? No, somebody's got to have one.
I mean, you get that population too low in the cotton field and it'll mess you up. I mean, you know, we were running checks that first year that I wrote them, and I had check blocks of, you know, what happens if I plant 20,000 out in the middle of this field? Well, you plant 20,000 cotton seed, you're talking about a week late maturity compared to the rest of the field that's 35, 40,000.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a major downside that you have to take into account when you're writing these prescriptions is, you know,
Getting a stand.
you get too low and you're going to delay maturity. And you need to know, you know, is this ground that's going to seal over? Because you might need more pushing power. You got, that's, you know, I want to say something too about that 100 zones thing. I'm not going through there and picking out what population to plant in each zone. I set a minimum and I set a maximum, and that program automatically assigns a value to those 100 zones, and they're all different. So it's a different way of doing it, but that planter's capable of doing it now. So it's making us money, like you said. I'm pretty thrilled with it.
Well,
It works, it works.
Nolan and I talked about last year was taking one of his fields that he actually farmed and looking at economics that, because you were looking at reducing your seeding rate on some, I mean, it's all irrigated, but you were looking at reducing your seeding rate to be able to manage that cost, because you knew you weren't going to make, on that end of the field, you weren't going to make the yield you were on the top end of the field. And this goes from a silt loam to a clay. And so trying to manage it economically, and you were talking about varying your seeding rate, looking at that, but that was just a basic prescription. I think you had 3 zones in the field. Talk about that a little bit, just what your...
Well, that was one thing we talked about last year is on a per irrigated field that's got lighter soil at the top and heavier soil at the bottom, trying to vary your seeding rate depending on how long the water will stand. You know, if you got a field that waters in 12 hours, the first 100 yards of that field is going to stay underwater for 12 hours, and then, you know, your last 100 yards is going to be, you know, for 2 hours probably. So we're trying to figure out, you know, what is better. Do I need more seed at the top? Do I need less seed at the top? Do I need more at the bottom, less at the bottom? And the equipment nowadays allows you to do that and put in test strips in the field. And that's all we were talking about doing is just figuring out what works on this field, on this farm. And it may be a match for this field and this farm that you can replicate every year. And that was one note I was going to talk about is most of the time when I use variable rate planting, it's not from seeding yet, because I don't have enough information to make good decisions off of what seeding rate goes where. What I've been doing is of course taking and making test strips in the field. Nowadays with equipment, you can have a 100-acre field, and let's say you're normally planting 34,000 seed if you're planting corn. You can by clicking a button in your cab, you can change that rate from, you can go up 20% and turn and make a pass down there and back and have a test plot. You can go back to your base rate, 34% or 34,000, and plant a few rows, and then you can go down 20% on your next pass. So it's putting test strips in your field to actually figure out what's going there. That's one way that I've been using it to try to collect a database that I can trust, depending on what crop it is. And another way that I've used it that has really seen the best return on my farm is using, anybody got per irrigated fields in the room? When you have a water pad that's out in the field, do you pick your planter up, do you plant across it and let the corn come up?
We've been planting across it, and then if need be, just bush hog.
what we've done for the last 2 years is, and it's not varying the seeding rate, but you can go out there and map that turn row or map that water pad and say, okay, I want this to be 10 foot wide, or I want it to be 15 feet wide. And with that, this planter, of course, is like, it's an electric drive, section by section row command, and it will actually cut off when you cut across that water pad. So now, tradition, just like you said, Marshall, when you go across that water pad, you've planted it. Now you got to go in there and you've got to disc it down. You got to clip it to lay your poly pipe out. Well, if you go out there and don't plant it, anybody can come out there now and lay your poly pipe down. Before, it was like having a ditch in the field. My dad always says, if you put a ditch in the field and it's in the wrong spot, you missed it. So if you planted your water pad and it's growing up in 6 foot corn after or 4 foot corn after you've taken a while to put your poly pipe down, you've got to go out there and drive it because you know where that poly pipe pad is. Now, with this technique, you can go in there and make a zero rate when it crosses that road, and that planter will cut off. And it don't matter if it's a straight line, or if it's a curve, or if it's a circle. It'll cut it off. And what that's allowed me to do is I save about, I don't know, 2 to 4% on seeding cost. And then also I don't fertilize. So I take that same file that I'm planting with, I put it in my side dress nitrogen applicator, and it doesn't fertilize. Now we'll spray it because we want to keep it clean, but we won't fertilize it and we won't plant it. And it saves about 2 to 4% depending on how big the field, how many turn rows you have, and seeding costs, and it'll save about that much in insult costs. So I haven't varied my seeding rate a lot when you're talking about variable seeding rate, but that is how I've been adjusting the seeding rate to help save some input costs on my farm.
Let me ask y'all, what do you trust more, variable rate P&K application or variable rate seeding application? What do you think would be more accurate?
P&K for me.
I'd say P&K, at least you got a soil test that you could fall back on.
Just because I don't have enough data.
The reason I'm asking is, we always talk about those. I think the fertilizer truck has a harder problem slinging out the right rate that we're calling for in a prescription versus these planters. These planters are so high tech now that I feel like I'm getting my money's worth more out of the variable rate planting side than I am the variable rate P&K.
But the problem with the variable rate seed, or any variable rate seed, you need at least 5 years of yield data, good yield data, that you've normalized and put it all together to come up with accurate zones.
Yeah.
And unless you're going through something like Noble, where you're collecting it over years, or field view or something, to get 5 years of data that you can truly bank on is sometimes gets to be pretty hard. Now it's getting easier because everything's uploaded now to the cloud. As you're cutting through the field, it's uploaded. But that data's still got to be you got to go in and clean that data to get an accurate yield map. And that's the problem. That's one thing with the 100 zones I'm a little concerned about.
Well, I think the other thing too is, if you're doing variable rate seeding, odds are you've had some sort of data technology on your farm for at least 5 years before you ever even jumped off into this shit. Because, you're talking about, we've got yield maps that go all the way back to 2006 on my John Deere. So, we've just never done anything with it. And these satellites have been taking pictures of our fields for God knows how long, and we're not using any of that data.
Yeah.
And,
Well, to answer his question, the variable rate seeding, the equipment will do it no matter what kind of equipment you have. It's just a matter of what you're going to base it off of. Do you base it off of soil type? Do you base it off of irrigated versus non-irrigated? And it can be field by field and crop by crop. So that's what the hang up for me is what is right. And I hadn't figured out exactly what is right yet, but allowing to put in test strips, that allows me to figure out my model I need to follow.
And you have to, and normalizing data is if you normalize data, then you take a lot of the variability of weather. It rained this year. This year was a wet year, or what had a couple. The year before last was a wet year. The year before that was dry. So and different crops react different ways. So when you normalize it, you take those factors out, and it becomes, just what the field produces. And that helps us a lot. In fact, I know RL and I've got to where now, we don't show yield maps. If we show you a yield map, in a presentation, it doesn't have most time it doesn't have a yield on it. It has a normalized yield.
Then,
Yes.
just in case, so they know what you're talking about. You
You know,
say normalized, 'cause a lot of times we run into that and folks don't know what we're talking about.
Normalized is basically you take the yield for the entire field and divide it into each yield point. One being average, greater than one is above, below, less than one is below average. And it takes, I can tell you, rule of thumb, it takes twice as much above average to raise up the same amount of below average. I mean, it's very good. It allows you to look at the field and see where your yield potential is coming from, where your yield is produced.
And it takes that bushel factor out of it to where you're looking at 0, 1, and a minus.
Yeah. And so,
It doesn't matter what crop it is.
It doesn't matter what
So
crop
shows
it
you-
is, that's where you
shows you where
compare them
the,
across years.
where the high yielding spots in the field are depending on what crop you're growing.
And what's always been amazing, when you really look at several years of it through several crops, you don't see a big shift in that high and low section of that field. It's gonna be high in cotton, high in corn, high in beans, that's the ones we deal with mainly. And it's gonna be right there pretty close, so you got more, you can add those years up faster
yeah.
by normalizing versus trying to get 5 years of corn where you have a 3-year rotation, you know.
I tell you, when we really got started with it was back, I guess, oh Lord, 2007 or 8. We had a trial on a farmer, picked 1,495 pounds of lint on cotton over the whole 78-acre field. He had 8 acres that picked less than a bale, and nematodes bad. And I said, well, you know, this is what you got. And he said, I don't give a damn. I picked 3 bales over the whole field. You know? And that's just a simplistic view to it, but that was what he looked at. I picked 3 bales across the field. Now, granted, he had some picked 4, but in that 8 acres, picked less than a bale. It was bad. And but that's where we kind of started. At that point, we went forward with normalizing data because you get lost in the yield and what it makes.
Well, to Mr. Dennis' point, once you get it normalized, you know, you can find, and it took me several years worth of information to build this database. And it didn't matter if it was corn, I grow corn, soybeans, and rice. So rice is its own animal. For corn and soybeans, it was spots in that field that only made 25 bushels of corn, 25 bushels of beans, and 100 bushels of corn, no matter how many, if you had a wet year, a dry year, an irrigated year, it didn't matter. It was going to make 25 bushels of soybeans, 100 bushels of corn. So you can manage your inputs to where you're only farming for, if you know you have a spot in the field, it may only be 5% of the field. But if it's only going to make 25 bushels of soybeans, what kind of seeding rate could you plant, Kelly, to make 25 bushels of beans on sandy ground? That's going to burn up on you. Just to make, if I'm only going to make 25 bushels, what can I plant out there?
Well, historically, Dan Poston used to talk about, even being down at, I know there's even levels lower than that, but at least 100,000 plants out there. A lot of people are still planting, 140,000 seed or 135,000, and that's about right, typically. But
that's to maximize yield,
that's
right?
to maximize yield. But even at 100,000, but I've seen some other data that's even shown down to 80,000 or 80,000 plants. So you can lower your seed costs
in those spots
in less productive areas.
Yeah, sure. That's what we've done but it takes like we're talking about. It takes years and years and years of information, and not only you got to know what the yield is out there in each crop, but you got to look at weather patterns. You got to look at all kind of other different materials that go on in that field, and it's showing you a trend. So you can't just do it on year 1. You got to do it with at least 4 or 5 years worth of data.
At least 5 years.
But once you figure out those spots, then you can adjust your seeding rate to not plant, not try to hit a home run in a spot in the field that you know is never going to hit a home run.
One thing we've noticed, and this has become a trend over the last 3 or 4 years, comparing with the growers we work with, we went through a period of time with GIS and everything, equipment got bigger. We got 12 rows and bigger, and everything got bigger. And with the planters we had, we were able to do minimum till, we were able to go from a silt loam to a heavy clay and keep populations and whatever we want to do. And we went through a farm basis. Used to, a long time ago, we farmed field by field. Everybody had, behind my house is a turn row that's been there since 1900. It split the silt loam on the front and clay on the back. And they started farming across it. Well, now we seeing that farms became like that. And whatever you did on that farm, you did everywhere on the farm. And now we're seeing a trend coming back because of the technology and the data and everything's going to the cloud. It's much more accessible. We're going back to a field by field basis where even though they're still crossing that turn road, they're changing their fertility rates and their seeding rates, or we don't have anybody changing varieties. As far as I know, the research station in St. Joe is the only one we can plant two varieties. We haven't done it yet other than just playing to make sure it all works, but at some point I'm thinking Dr. Josh Copes he's going to get into that. We got Wes, you back there in the back.
Yeah.
This is Dr. Wes Porter. He's an engineer from Georgia.
I was going to say, I agree with everything y'all said. The critical thing is when you get that yield data, you got to look at those trends over time and move it to a normalized map. Really starts to take that out. I mean, I wonder y'all reiterated that so many times. But once you've sat down and did that, the nice thing you can do is then you can go in and put in any field, on-farm test you want within that. You look at your individual response, and you see, all right, in this particular year compared to these zones, did I increase yield where I was low? Did I decrease yield? What did I do? Did I achieve the goal here? That starts matching back up. When we look at, I'll go back to the soybean seeding rate study. Now, I'll be honest, I would stretch some rates out. Agronomists probably call us stupid as engineers, but I like to push a curve when I look at stuff where I know that it's at the bottom end or close to failure. Right? We've had some, and I'm going to go to cotton for just a minute. So we're coming from Georgia, we do a ton of cotton. We push some studies where we've got seeding rates on cotton accidentally down. That's just because of emergence, because the treatment's down below like 19,000, 15,000 plants per acre. So we got that low, we were like, man, this is not going to look good when we get to the yield. You know what? The yield was almost the same as our 30 to 40,000 plant per acre treatments and where it came out. So even though we didn't get that stand, it was kind of there. Cotton's a different beast. We'll just go ahead and put that out there on the table. But when we start looking at it, we've got to be careful when we start stretching those top and bottom ends. That if we do have failures we're not confident in, let's go back, we're not confident in getting that stand at that time. We don't want to be walking that thin red line, but we want to find where the upper end of that line's at, that we're comfortable in that field. If we lose a little bit of population, we're still at an acceptable input level, right? We don't want to be putting, in this consistently low area. There's nothing we're going to do to recoup that ever, right? It doesn't matter what I do out there. I can test high populations, low populations, different fertility, whatever I wanted to do, and I never see a true response. It's always consistently low even in my test strips. Well, then we got to really reevaluate what my management strategy is going to be. I'm going to take what Dennis said and take it one step further, some work we've done. I think there's a Cotton Incorporated has a booklet on it, and it's you can apply this to anything. It doesn't have to be cotton, but it's developing profit maps out of your yield maps. It's extremely simple. If you figure out how to develop a normalized yield map, you can develop a profit map even easier. If you know what your input cost was, all you do is go and basically minus that off for that particular area of yield. And so obviously you have a header width wide by the length that was collected in. You'll know the length because the time it took to collect it, the speed you were traveling, all that information is in the yield file. But once you figure that out, we create that profit map, then let's go look at a stability map or a normalized yield map over time compared to a profit map. In those low yield areas, am I consistently losing money time and time again? And Dennis's point, it seems to take a lot more high yield to pull up that low yield. And so when we start looking at it from a profit standpoint, I think that's the other thing we start seeing, that when we start losing profit on part of the field or the majority of the field, we're really using another part of the field to pay to farm that other land, or to pay for the extra inputs we're putting in on the other land that we don't need. So kind of think about some of those things in the back of your mind when we're running these test strips. Where are we at? What's an acceptable level for me? And what's my end goal that I'm trying to achieve with that? And that'll kind of help us, help us know when we do the on-farm tests and test strips, where we want to be and what we're going to do with them. So it's a good thing. That's what you need to do. We've got the technology now. This young man here in the back made a comment about planters. We can do almost anything with them now, right? If we've got the advanced control system on them, then you punch a button, you change the seed frame. You punch a button, you change the downpour. Do whatever we want right there from the cab. And so put some flags out, run some strips, and then come back and evaluate the yield at the end of the year. And then see where you want to go from there. It's a good discussion y'all having.
Let me say one thing too, and this applies to fertilize, applies to anything you do if you write a prescription in a field or across fields, do variable, whatever you do, I don't care what you do. Always, somewhere in that field, put a strip across the field that is consistent. The standard is your one chest check. Because, you know, if you do the whole field, you know it works. You know, what great. But if you don't have something to gauge against it, and it doesn't have to be in every field, just at random, just something to go across it to say, yes, it worked, it was worth the effort, you know, it did work. Or, and maybe in some cases, it'll show up, it works on one end of the field, like in Noble's case, it works on one end, doesn't necessarily work on the other end. I know, 10 years ago, there was some talk, when we first really got into yield maps, or in early 2000, we got into yield maps, and people were looking at areas and said, well, I'm losing money on this area. I don't want to farm this area anymore. You know, I've got this spot out here in the field, I don't want to farm it. But then when they went to their landlord and said, well, we're not going to farm this, landlord said, oh, yeah, we're going to farm that too. You know, so
you're going to still pay the rent on it.
You're still going to pay the rent on it. So that kind of died away pretty quick. But it came down to looking at economics, saying, I know I'm going to make 25 bushels of beans on this field. I'm not going to make 70 in this particular spot. I'm not going to make 70. I need to farm for 25 bushels.
You need to know, Dennis is exactly right, you need to know what you're doing currently. Sorry if I overran that, I didn't mean to. And then, you know, the reason I like to push a higher end than what we're currently doing on stuff, sometimes some of those higher yielding areas of the field may have a little bit more potential. We will never know that if we don't test it, and we don't want to go and test the whole field, right? We don't want to just throw the kitchen sink at it. I've had guys that come to me that want to, they want to do this, and this, and I'm like, well, hold on. You know, the scientist in me is like, hold on, we're not going to know what even changed, what affected that, what made that positive change. Let's take one step first. What's your biggest problem? That's the first question you got to ask. What's my biggest problem right now? And then when you answer that question, that's the first thing you need to attack. And then you move forward from there.
But that's what I found too is getting back to the seeding question is what's best for my farm, my fields, and that's what I was alluding to at the very beginning the equipment nowadays, it's not hard at all to put in test strips. You just click a few buttons in your monitors depending on what model equipment you have, and you can change the rate where it's a variable rate or it's a standard rate or it's the check. So that's what I found successful is building that experience and that database of what I can trust so I can take the next leap into fully variable rate seeding if that's what I choose to do. I may figure out that it's not even worth it on some of my fields to do with it. That it was more trouble than it's worth to vary from top to bottom or vary from zone to zone. But it's a matter of figuring it out and running test strips in that field.
That's one thing we've run into with variable rate. We've been variable rate corn for 15 years. Our zones have evolved. We've got some zones that may be 20 acres. We got some that may be 5 acres. But we've developed what works and what optimizes that particular area by stacking yield mounts on top of each other. I'm in the Tennessee Valley. We can't norm cotton and corn because our cotton yields are in a different spot than where our good corn yields are. But we can stack cotton yields mounts on top of each other. We stack corn yields on top of each other, and we develop our zones for fertilize, for soil samples, for variable rate seeding, and it has evolved. A man needs to be willing to change those zones as you need them.
They evolve over time.
Okay.
They do.
We've kind of touched on it several different times. Everybody has mentioned it. I'm going to throw it out one more time. Every farm, every field is different. There's no such thing in my mind as a cookie cutter for precision ag, and a lot of folks like to try that. What works on my place may not work on Dennis or Noble's place. Okay? The test strips. A farmer needs to be doing his own small testing on his own farm. Very simple with today's technology. I remember when Dennis and I first started doing nitrogen strips with the old John Blue pumps. We'd have to go out there and manually crank it up 20 units or something. We crank it up. We were shooting for 20 units. We didn't ever know really what we were doing. We just cranked it up. And we put a mark so we knew what to come back to, and so we cranked it down the next round about as much as we cranked it up. Thinking in terms. you got your yield maps on your combine. You got several programs that'll analyze those regardless of what yield mapping system you're running. And you can analyze those from the combine with the data straight out of the combine. You know, to me, before you do anything, the reference strips on your farm and in your fields to look at whether it be fertilization or seeding rates. And don't, I hate it when a guy goes out there and tries to put a reference strip in it and he knows that's the sweet spot of that field.
Don't put it in the best.
Don't put it in the best spot of the field. Kind of get a true representation of your field. If you have to put in one across the sweet spot, one across the bad, know that field. I know this is a little off topic here, Dennis, as far as the variable seeding rate, but when we started looking at yield maps and analyzing them until that light bulb goes off in his head. You can preach to him till you're blue in the face. He's got to see something. And I never forget the first time I seen the light bulb go off in a producer's eyes. We laid a yield map up there and we zone sampled it for him. And when I got soil sample results back and I looked at them, started laying them over the top of the yield map, the lowest yielding section of that field had the highest fertility. I'm scratching my head. Why? I take it out there and I lay it on the hood of my truck and I said, now this is what we got. I don't know why. He said, I can tell you. And he explained to me what had happened. They had fresh cut ground. That was a sandy part of the field, extremely dry that year. The upper end of the field was heavy clay. He said, I couldn't keep enough water on the sand. He knew the answer. I would have looked at it. Somebody else, we don't know. And the reason I'm telling that story is nobody knows your field like you do. You've got to know your field. That's the reason I encourage the strip trials, on-farm demonstrations. You don't have to do it with us, with the Extension Service. You don't have to do it with seed companies. Do your own. Like everybody has said, it's so simple. You punch a button, it changes. And in reality, with today's technology, you don't even need to flag it.
No.
You don't even need to flag
Just mark it in your monitors.
You got it in your monitor. It's going to show where you changed that seeding rate. And when you harvest it, if it didn't show up in the yield map, was it worth it? Now, don't say if it just because it was green. I mean, you got to really break it down and analyze it to the point where you're getting, on corn, maybe less than 5 bushel. You're looking for 5 bushel variation.
You're looking for statistical stuff.
Statistics there. So again, you can do all that on your farm. And I know in our area, Dennis and I are willing to help and help people all the time. And have been known to cross state lines.
Yeah. Don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody. Oh, I forgot they were recording. No, they didn't record. We all know. I don't know who was supposed to turn the camera on. They never told me that.
Mike's blue behind you is on.
Okay. All right. So anyway, that's okay. Powers that be know it.
Let me say this, though. Whatever you do with any of these precision variable rate seeding, any of things, strips, whatever, just realize it's not like you spray Remoxone, everything turns brown. It's a long-term thing. And as you said, you've got years and years of data, and you got to put it together, and it takes a lot of time, and it's a long-term process. But every year you collect data, you learn more about it. And nowadays, with we're looking at the prices we're looking at, yield variability from year to year. Every penny counts, and if you can make that penny, if you can make it or figure out a way to save it or earn it, it's worth something.
I'm going to throw out one more controversial topic that we get in trouble with, but I'll stick to it. I ain't worried about what you make. I don't worry about yield. To me, the top end yield does not always produce the most return for your investment. That's what I look at, is return on investment. You may not be able to go to the coffee shop and brag on it, but you brag that you may have put more money in the bank than they did off the same acreage. Don't worry, don't get hung up on the bushels and the yield. And that's where these variable rating can help you, to where you can make money even if you got a lower yield. That's my timer going off. I forgot to say this before we leave. There's a sign-in sheet in the back for those that are wanting CCU credits and all that kind of stuff. I forgot to mention that. Please sign that. Okay, Marshall, I'm
It's just
sorry.
like general planning for variable rate seeding, like, if you have years of data and you normalize it, in my opinion, corn is fairly easy because it responds so significantly to population. Would you take that same approach with soybeans and cotton that kind of compensate? Like Mr. Kelly was saying, you can have the same yield with 50, 60,000 less plants. You push those high yielding fields with population, or do you pull them back?
I think you have to, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted, so, in cotton, one of the things that we do when we're making our seeding prescriptions is that cotton has nothing to do with yield when it comes to seeding prescriptions for us. It's strictly for disease management. So, when I come up with a cotton prescription, if I know I'm gonna have a real growthy field, I'll back my seeding rate down to have a short plant and manage target leaf spot. Or, you know, we're gonna get into rice sometime soon, these monsoon planters, and we're talking about planting hybrid rice at 14 pounds, just to see what happens. But anyway, I thought bringing the cotton up, cotton's the worst one to look at yield when it comes to variable rate prescriptions, so it won't show you anything. But you have
I think
management.
I don't think it's enough data for me, the variable rate soybeans yet. But I mean, that's what the next thing I'd like to look at is can you do it, and is it a problem? I mean, the equipment will do it. And we've got all the soil sample data, we've got NDVI data, we've got yield data. Now it's just a matter of what rate matches what zone.
I think the thing you have to be concerned about, and I've had growers tell me, we've talked about soybean seeding rates, 140, 150, 160,000. And the one common theme is, I want to make sure I get a stand.
Yep.
And we saw it this year with some beans. We had issues with the beans didn't have, they weren't really, when they came up, but then they just kind of, they didn't have any vigor to it. And so we ended up dying. They got some of them this tall, some of them this, and they just gradually went away. We ended up with thin stands, and in some cases down to 80,000 or even a little less. And we were still able to win because they can compensate. But don't look at that high end and say, well, I'm gonna plant more. I think you look at soybeans as a reasonable planting option. You know, if you have a low yielding area, maybe back off some, but it's not like corn where you're gonna push it.
Yeah.
And cotton just compensates.
I want to retouch the cotton really quick, I know we're out of time. You're right, so it doesn't, you really don't see a yield response out of it. But I think what you might see from that perspective, y'all open discussion, if we're planting, and I don't know what seed rates are planting, we're pretty low in Georgia already, so we don't have much left on the bottom end. I'll come out and say, if you feel like you're planting a pretty high seeding rate, why are you doing that? And can you just back down on that seeding rate and let those plants compensate a little bit? Like you mentioned, maybe you get a little extra benefit of some disease control or something else in there with those a little bit thinner plant stands, but you still end up maintaining the same yield level. You feel confident in cotton that we can back down a little bit what we're doing right now and still be all right. So that might be a question you could answer with it. We're not going to see a yield response, but let's go back to what RL said. What are we going to see out of that? Cotton's very expensive, and I hope we don't have any seed dealers in there. They all know that. That's one of our biggest input costs for planting time is cotton seed. So if we can back down a little bit, 5,000 seed per acre, maybe 10, I don't know about 10, but 4,000 or 5,000 seed per acre, well, we'll just put a little bit more money in our pocket then, and maybe we've also helped ourselves from another perspective. So maybe sometimes, like we said, it's not always about yield, but what else can we evaluate it based on to see where we're at. The best thing we want to see is back down 5,000 seed per acre and see the same yield, right? That's the best thing we want to see, because then we know we just lowered the input cost right there.
All right, thank y'all.
Good time, like I said, be sure to sign.